Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to another edition of your favorite podcast, the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast, all things cybersecurity. Continuing on that momentum, I have an awesome guest for you today. You probably know the name. You've probably read some of the publications or read the websites. I've got Bob Bragdon with me. Bob, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
All right, Bob, tell the people a little bit about CISO and what it is that you built over there, because we'll start there.
Sure. So if you're not familiar with the CISO brand launched in 2002. We were a magazine originally with a little website. 2002 was a little different back then. We weren't all in on the media website. Yeah, funny how that was. So we started out as a magazine. We were part of IDG. Okay. So we rolled out a CIO magazine, right? That was our entree into the marketplace. But IDG also produced, they call themselves Foundry now, but they also produce Computer World, Network World, Info World, all the PC World, all those things, a lot of events and stuff. So we launched in 2002 as a monthly magazine. And funny story about that is that we spent some time with some chief security officers in the Boston area where we're based. And before we launched the magazine, to kind of talk about what's it going to be, what's the role going to be. And one of them was had just retired as the CISO at Fidelity Investments. The other guy was a CISO at Genzyme. Another guy was CISO at Boston Scientific. And we came out with the first issue, and it was really all about operational risk, right? It wasn't just cybersecurity risk; it was operational risk. So we had it was about 50-50 physical and IT security. We covered all sorts of different stuff. And the first issue comes out, and we get a call from the guy who retired from Fidelity. And he said, in not so plain terms, can we come in and sit down with you? We're like, okay. And so he comes out, and the three of them come on, they meet with us, and they said, you guys got to focus on operational risk. This is a business issue, not just a technology issue, not just this little stuff. And we really rejiggered the whole organization. And, the editor at the time, Lou McCurry, and then, Derek Slater after him, and some others after him, we really focused everything very, very differently, and ultimately became pure play around cybersecurity risk because of, kind of market conditions that fit a little bit better with our model. But this idea that you need to align risk with business opportunity. And that was a very different approach to security back then, because some people were thinking that way, but you didn't see it anywhere in the media, right? It wasn't about how you enabling the business. It was more about how are we, what's our firewall? Because, how are we set up a firewall? How do we keep all that crap out of our environment, right? And it was none of this discussion about, well, maybe we need to be willing to accept some of the crap so that we can go into other markets, so we can drive more revenue, so we can do stuff like that. So we did that, and around 2004, we launched our first event. It was the CISO Perspectives Conference, and it's evolved into what's now called the CISO 50 conference. Ran that for, I was there until 2023.
Good run.
I've loved this evolution of watching this evolution of the CISO role, right? Whether it's CSOs or CISOs or whatever the title happens to be, they're all over the place. Really a business role first, a technology role second. And all about, again, going back to what I talked about a second ago, balancing risk and business opportunity. Don't be a roadblock in the business. Understand how to sell the value of security to business leadership. Have good levels of reporting within the organization. And a lot of focus, which is something we really tried to do what we could with the magazine and the website, but brought it to life through events, which was Educate and Elevate, which is share best practices, right? Get like-minded CISOs and security leaders together and get them talking about the problems and how they're solving it. Because my experience doing these, like over 1,000 of these events over the years, was that the financial services people talk to the financial services people, the healthcare people talk to the healthcare people. There was no cross-pollination happening. And when you get them together and healthcare heard how finance was doing it, and insurance heard how retail was doing it, suddenly great ideas started to come out of that. And so that was kind of our model. We did everything from large events like I said, the Perspectives, which became CISO 50 Conference, Hall of Fame Awards. I started a dinner program in 2007, which I still continue to this day in my own capacity. I've hosted over 1,000 dinners, a lot of steaks. But again, bringing together a lot of people, talking about common problems, seeing how you're going to solve them.
So I got to tell you, business first, technology second. There are plenty of people out there today that disagree with that rather heavily.
Yep.
There are lots of conversations where folks are jumping in and saying things like, well, we need to stop coddling the business and letting them make mistakes, and we need to step in and be the judge, jury, and executioner on security matters because that's our remit. What do you say to that?
That's a good way to get pigeonholed in the business and get pushed down in the reporting structure. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're a business, right? You're trying to generate revenue, you're trying to sell product, you're trying to do whatever your business does. And if security is the department of no, right? We've heard this for decades now.
Decades.
No, you can't do that. The reality is people are going to go around you, right? They're going to go out and they're just going to do whatever they want. And that's how we end up with silos of technology and silos within the business and people just doing all sorts of things and running around with no security being implemented or even being considered, despite demands that may be coming down from the top. And then we can talk about the role of the board and stuff like that and how that's changed. But you got to be willing to take into account what the business needs of the organization are and balance them.
I get that. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, right? You got to be able to understand that the company needs to move, the company needs to grow, what it takes to run the organization. From your perspective, how has that role of the corporate security officer, information security officer, chief security officer, whatever that role is, whatever it's titled, how have you seen that evolve from being in kind of down in the organization, oftentimes reporting to someone like a CTO or lower, and now we get various different reporting structures? What's your take on the evolution there? Well,
the reporting structure has migrated generally to more business engagement, and something I saw when I was at CISO for the last 7-8 years was large number of CISOs reporting into the CEO. And it may be dotted line, right? But it's that recognition by the C-suite that security is important, driven by a bunch of things: regulatory compliance issues, partner mandates, the risk environment. And we're really seeing, I think we see that now with businesses seeing significant impact from cybersecurity events, right? Look at CDK right now, right? I have a friend who's waiting for his car to come in, and he's been waiting 3 weeks when it was supposed to be in June because, the whole system's down.
Yeah.
And so they can't process that too. So that's an impact. You look at what happened to Clorox last night. I didn't even know Clorox made cat litter, right? I went to order cat litter for my cats and you couldn't get it. I'm like, wait a minute, they make, okay, that's all right. But this understanding that it's really important that you align it appropriately with the business. And you can go all the way back. I mean, I think it was 2003, 2004. We were doing work with PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte and KPMG and all these guys at the time. They're saying you can't have security report into IT. It's a conflict of interest, right? There's competing priorities within the organization. Now, at the same time, you've had, on the other side, you've had organizations like National Association of Corporate Directors and the corporate roundtable and all these organizations saying you need to have security expertise on the board, you need to have security expertise in the C-suite. It's becoming a fundamental part of the business as the risks have grown, and also, frankly, as the liabilities have grown. Right? You got the plaintiffs' bars lining up the last 10 years to sue anybody. I mean, we're already seeing this. I mean, we're 3 weeks into the CDK story, and we've already seen class action suits.
Yeah, there's like 3 I think I read that are lining up to take this. It's interesting because the security leads I worked with at the time, my time in enterprise, were I thought kind of forward leaning, right? Dan Kairoy, who's the last CISO that I worked for at GE Consumer Finance, and GE, whatever, it became a spinoff. I forget the name of the spinoff, but he was very forward thinking in terms of aligning, taking the mandates the CIO would publish in terms of company growth and what we wanted to grow, where we wanted to go, how we wanted to get there, and then drawing the lines and the bridges between the initiative security needed to undertake to enable the business goals that the business had. But now I'm starting to see that more and more. But I gotta say, Bob, it's still largely a game of whack-a-mole in terms of,
of course,
what tech do you have, right? Because there's just a tremendous amount of technical, technical glut out there. Is that the right word? I mean, everybody's got everything twice over.
Yeah. They're really kludgy environments, right? Everyone's kind of mishmash of technologies that they've thrown together, and it makes it really difficult to manage those. But at the same time, as security's become more important, it's harder to get security people, right? Because everybody's hiring them now. It's like the number of CISOs has grown dramatically over the last 10 years because you start seeing regulations saying you need to have a CISO in your organization.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of the realization at the board level or the CEO level that, geez, maybe we should get somebody in that role. I got to tell you, I still see a lot of businesses that just don't have a clue about this stuff. I mean, they just continue to make stupid mistakes and think, well, no one's going to give us a hard time. We're not going to be bothered. I mean, that's a mistake Sony made, right? And they had a good security organization back in the day, but they were like, oh, come on, nation state, what's that?
Yeah, right. What's really interesting? This is just something that I guess fascinates me is, even though we've made that move towards more business savvy CISOs, the requirement to put CISOs in places there weren't before has created, and I talked about this on the show before with some other guests, a vast sea of massively underqualified people that are sitting in a seat that they should not be in, because somebody wanted they heard security. They're like, all right, I'll hire somebody that I know that's pretty good at this thing. Never led a team, but that's all right. How hard can this be, right? And it's bearing the fruit that you'd think it would.
Yeah, it does. But there's also that risks. I mean, a lot of people are going to the CISO role and they have no idea what the risks are, the personal risks that they face, right?
Yeah.
Take a look at what happened to Joe Sullivan in the last couple of years. Look at what's happening to Tim Brown at SolarWinds. I mean, I had Joe on stage at CISO 50 conference last year, interviewing him about what he'd gone through. It was really kind of eye-opening because, he was a big advocate. You got to get on the D&O policy if you're a CISO, the directors and officers policy, to get the protections. But they won't protect you if they come after you, and it's a criminal issue, not civil. And at the time, he was telling us how much Tim Brown was already out of pocket on for legal fees, and Tim hadn't even been indicted at that point. I mean, this adds up to millions of dollars really easily. And I think a lot of people go in there, they go, oh, no, I'm good. I'm the CISO, but I'm not really the CISO. Oh, no, you have the title.
Right. Right.
You're going to get, and you have
lawyers don't care.
You're going to get named.
Yeah. Lawyers don't care if you're just be filling a seat. What's interesting, though, those cases aside, Tim and Joe aside, there's still a lot of debate on whether CISOs getting sued and indicted and personally named is going to, quote, chill the role. Like, it's going to make people think twice before taking it. I think it'll make certain people think twice before taking it.
I agree.
But the ones that I want in those seats are like, know this was coming. Like, we're well aware that these were possibilities. Yeah,
and you negotiate that going into a job, right? So I know a lot of CISOs who weren't on D&O policy and are at their company and use that as these stories we talked about a minute ago, the opportunity to engage with general counsel and with the CEO and say, you need to put me in the D&O policy. It doesn't cost you anything, put me on it, and here's why, and show some examples. I see a lot of the senior CISOs as they move from job to job, that's a negotiating point, right? That's part of your package that you're going to have. And increasingly, you're seeing them also get agreements that the company will pay for their outside counsel.
Oh, that's
separate from the company, right? Because your general counsel represents the firm. They don't represent you as an employee.
That's right.
And also crisis management. So a crisis management team. Because if it goes south, you need that help if you are in the news. We always joked about, you don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Well, you really don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal with this, and you better help, because most people, particularly someone who's just been, a career, security person, they don't have the skill set to manage that kind of a process, just like they, wouldn't have the skill set to manage the legal side of that process.
Bob, it's been said many, many times, maybe complained about the fact that CISOs quote didn't get a seat at the big kids table. They weren't taken seriously enough, right? And this to me has been a be careful what you wish for, kids, because this is a seat at the big kids table, but this is what comes with it, right? It's not just more prestige and more money. It is a layer more of risk. Being a corporate officer, having a fiduciary responsibility, having a legal responsibility to protect the company, there are things that you can no longer say. There are precautions you must take that you didn't really necessarily have to if you weren't really a corporate officer, right?
Right.
And again, this goes back to, I think, some of it's inexperience, some of it's just industry growing pains, and both sides of the table are learning how to sort of, the prosecuting side is learning, like, hey, what are these guys actually going through? I can't just hammer them because a mistake was made, because I'd kill everybody. Right? Yeah, right. And on the other side, they're like, wait a minute. Oh, right. I can't go out in public and say, oh, we are the best security company. We have zero breaches and gaps ever. And then when you get breached, you go, oh, crap. What do you mean? Did I just lie to investors? Oh, no, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bad thing.
Right? Because those are bad things. I don't know. I think
I was going to say, you asked about the chilling. Is there a chilling effect, right? I think the chilling effect is taking place in a different way than I expected it to. I'm seeing more senior level CISOs say, you know what, maybe it's time to go, hang on some advisory boards and join a venture capital firm and do that, right? I mean, I was, kind of, limited interaction with CISOs face to face during the pandemic, right? It just wasn't happening. And as it slowly come back, I was, to find that a lot of the people I knew for years, really top-notch CISOs, they're running around with the venture capital firms now and sitting on advisory boards and making a great living that way without that risk, without the day-to-day just nightmare. You can't find staff. We got pockets of technology we're finding that are a nightmare. We got the regulators climbing all over us. Well, who wants that?
Well, I think there's some air to the companies that have had CISOs for years, even moderately competent ones, have had a program for a while. So you're not walking into a total shit show. However, the ones that are hiring a CISO for the first time, boy, you don't know what I mean, the opportunity is phenomenal, but also I feel like this is remember that game of Pitfall where you just got like, oh man, don't grab a snake. Because you grab a snake, you die, right?
Somebody told me the other day that the best job to have is to be a deputy CISO.
That's right. That's right.
You get to actually do the technology work. You get to actually learn all this stuff. But your boss is the one that's going to get hung out to dry.
You know what though? I have seen, unfortunately, and this is the kind of the sad side of this. Companies, after a breach, they fire, the CISO. Oh, you must have done something bad. I've watched really good companies let go of entire CISO, deputy CISO, and directors and down. Really competent folks, due to what I can only knowing, the limited amount that we always know. Right. But from what I knew of these places, like, this is a joke. Like, come on, man. Like, this is one of those situations where, okay, a mistake was made. This wasn't incompetence. This was just sheer volume of work. Like, this is, and you can't keep firing people when they make mistakes. But worse, when the company makes a mistake, because that's the part that, from an opportunity perspective, that scares me, and why I don't think I had very little desire to go be a CISO, although the pay would have been better, is that I'm ultimately responsible for what other people do. Yeah. Right. Bad choices people make, I would ultimately be responsible for. And you can, I mean, in the best run companies, you can give all the technology incentives. You can do the training. You can put roadblocks in, but stupid people are still going to stupid. It's just how it's going to work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even stupid. It's just, you're busy. You're like, oh, that looks legit. I'm going to open it. Oh crap. What did I just do? Like that happens.
Well, and how long do you want to be banging your head against the wall if you're running into in institutional, corporate, and transients?
That's right.
They just don't want to change. We're going to do it this way, and you make us safe. Okay, right? You're like, that's an easy thing to do. Yeah.
Here's a quarter. No authority, but here's all the accountability. Go make us safe. Yeah, that's But this kind of reminds me of that Kenny Rogers song. Sometimes you just got to know when to walk away, man, or when to run. I think
you see it happen.
You do. You really. I've seen seasoned, like people that have done this a while. CISOs take jobs, and 3 months later they're somewhere else. And I'm always liking ping those like, hey, what happened there? They're like, not for me. Like that is not.
There are those firms that have.
I want to try to grab.
Yeah, there are those firms that have. It's the rotating door, right? Someone comes in and they're there for a year and a half, and they're going, what a mess.
Yeah, I'm out.
I'm better getting out of here and doing something else than hanging around here. And then somebody else comes in, and it's, the question is, are you doing your due diligence when you're going in the door to really understand what's going on? You're getting a realistic picture of what it's like inside, before you get there. And then do you actually have the support of senior management and the budget and the wherewithal and the access to hire staff and structure things the way you need to actually, solve the problems that they have?
Well, I mean, the title is nice, and you gotta watch for the fact that accountability is probably coming. But if you've got accountability for things, you damn well better have control over them, or at least pretty heavy input into how they function, because being accountable for organization that you cannot control how they do things, what decisions they make at all, that's not one you want to be in. I mean, it's just not. It's I've seen unfortunately too many good people get caught up in organizations that simply, for lack of a better term, could not be bothered, right? To do the right thing. And I'm not saying, turn off everything that's bad, because if a company stopped taking risks, it would cease to function, right? You and I take 1,000 risks before lunch every day. Companies are the same way. But it's knowing the fact that you hired somebody to tell you, that's a bad one, don't do that. I highly advise against it, and you do it anyway. And you're like, oh yeah, just figure out how to keep me safe from it. Like jumping in the alligator pit with bacon tied around your waist. There's just not a good way to survive that. It just isn't.
Well, you did a podcast recently. You're talking about.
Lost Bob. Come back, Bob. Where did he go?
Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
There you go. You said you did a podcast recently, and then he disappeared.
Yeah. Okay. So you did a podcast recently about the GSA.
Yes.
Recommendations. It came out right. And it was
good Lord.
Since 2010, all their recommendations, the government agencies have only implemented 2/3 of them. I mean, this really?
But on the flip side of that is, hold on, you're telling me that everything since 2010 is still relevant today?
Yeah.
I'm going to have a hard time believing that, Bob.
Well, I'll introduce you to a couple of banks I know that are still running Alpha VAX servers and Open VMS.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, there's that legacy technology.
That's right. So, I mean, that's a good place to take it for kind of the back half of this conversation is technical debt in some of these companies is so heavy. It's been around. It has. It's not going anywhere. There's still business built on top of it, and you're being essentially asked, "Hey, here's technology that the company stopped supporting 15 years ago. They stopped existing 5 years ago, but we're going to keep using. Okay. And I get it. That's a business decision, but you gotta
defined OT.
You got to find a way not to be held accountable for that, because that is not yours. That's not your fault.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you don't even it's not even an option. You can't replace some of this stuff. So you're stuck with it.
That's fair.
But you know what?
That is totally
What's
fair.
the first thing that you're going to get hammered on by the regulators or in a lawsuit? They were running Windows 95. That's right.
That's right. Why was that squeeze still
going to go after that? Yeah, I know. I think, a kind of bigger issue, but I think one of the bigger issues we're going to see over the next year is, the other day, U.S. Supreme Court tossed Chevron deference that gave all these agencies the ability to go out and create these regulations and set up their administrative courts and stuff. And that's gone now. And I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's a big hit to like FTC, SEC, some of these others. A couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, I interviewed the head of enforcement for cyber and crypto at the SEC.
Okay.
Made no bones about it that they wanted to own regulation in this space. And then a few months later, I interviewed the general counsel for the National Labor Relations Board. What their play in cybersecurity is, I have no idea. They want to own cybersecurity regulation. Everybody sees this as a moneymaker, right, for their agencies. It's a way to accrue power, to do get more visibility for the organization.
That scares the hell out of me. But
they make up their rules based upon what they think is appropriate. Not going to be able to do that as easily anymore.
Well, so this is kind of the problem I have with like government regulators and government regulating anything is they're not really experts at these things.
No,
they look for obviously these agencies in government look for power. They look for ways to control and centralize. And that would be fine if we're talking about, the minimum wage, workers' rights, that kind of thing. But cyber is a fast-paced world where things change minute to minute. Regulations, I get it, are important and necessary. But the way you write OSHA rules isn't going to work for the way that you write cyber rules. It's just not. Because by the time it goes through the required review process, it gets printed. It's now so far out of date that it may not even make sense anymore. And that's kind of, I think, where we've landed. Hey, so before we run out of time, tell me what you're doing now.
Yeah. So after I left CISO, I started my own firm called Risk Strat Advisory. And I do a bunch of different things in there, but a lot of it is very similar to what I did when I was at CISO. I spent time bringing together security leaders to discuss kind of those common challenges like we talked about earlier, share best practices, connected with solution providers, large and small. Interesting side note on that we didn't get into, but when we launched CSO, there were about 1,500 cybersecurity vendors in the world, right? And I completely miscalled that because I said, it's going to be mergers and acquisitions and flush out. I have a bunch of big companies, a bunch of ankle biters. And earlier this year, I was talking to someone at a venture firm that just done the survey. There were over 4,500 cybersecurity vendors out there.
That still feels
anyway,
low.
I'm working with a lot of those guys. I'm hosting a lot of dinners like I used to. So I'll be in San Francisco and DC and Dallas this month. Also acting as a principal analyst on some researches that we're doing in the industry with a couple of clients. And I still go back to CSO 50 to host their conference and awards and help out with some of their annual research.
Well, that's awesome. This conversation just keeps reminding me that in 20 years as an industry, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
However, there is a mountain to climb. Like we're halfway to base camp on Everest, right? Like we're halfway to base camp, and we're like, all right, look at how cool we are. Look how far we've grown. And you look up, you're like, oh, right.
Yeah. It's like trying to climb Everest in the 1800s. We ain't getting there anytime soon.
There's such a, and I'm glad, some of the things that you guys have published, some of the stories you have are really good. And it's just interesting to hear of the evolution and the timeline and just the change between where we started, where we are now, and where we hopefully will end up. I'll ask you one more in 30 seconds or less here. What is, if we do this again in, 5 years, what's the state of the CISO, CSO, CISO?
I think they
What is
take
it?
on I'm seeing it happen already. They're taking on more responsibility, and then to a certain extent, they're becoming a little bit of a dumping ground. I've seen a lot of CISOs take over infrastructure, right? And
Okay.
it's being given to them. And I
Really?
remember 5 years ago talking to Dave Eslick when he was at Starbucks, and he got infrastructure. He was like, "Oh, they gave me infrastructure." You know, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. But I think you're going to see more and more elements pushed onto the CISO role as they, you're paying them a lot of money, you're giving them a lot of responsibility. And you could argue at the end of the day, everything's impacted by security, so maybe it should sit over there.
That's interesting. I like it. I'm going to be more conscious of looking for that now. I've heard of. I know Dave's got that role because we talked about that a bit. I don't know whether he's blessed with it or cursed with it, but we'll see.
I say seriously, I run into it all the time now. People
Really?
who own
Okay.
infrastructure as well. Yeah.
Well, that is an interesting move.
It's evolving because the CIO role is evolving as well.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, this has been a entertaining 30 minutes. I'm glad to have finally gotten a chance to sit down and chat with you. It was
great to catch up.
Yeah, it's great to catch up. Great seeing you. And I wish you luck on the endeavor, and don't be a stranger. Folks, thank you for listening. This has been another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast with my guest, Mr. Bob Bragdon, and doing some really interesting things. Again, you probably know his name, read his stuff. And, as always, if you've got questions, comments, thoughts, drop them into LinkedIn, and we'll answer them. We'll get Bob engaged. We'll bring him back again, I'm sure, as things change over the next couple of years. But for now, thanks for listening. I'll catch you guys another time, another place on another Down the Security